What are Colorful Lynae's biggest pros and cons? That's what I'm here to tell you today. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. So, for starters, this unit is going to be wonderfully flexible. She's mostly being made as a second slot teammate for Tomb Break teams. However, it should be noted that we don't really have any main DPS in the game right now that takes advantage of the Tomb Break mechanics specifically. Of course, every character is going to be able to utilize Tomb Break, but we don't have any specific main DPS that caters to it specifically. However, fear not, because this lively young lass is still going to be an excellently flexible unit on release. Generally, if you have a character on your account, you are going to be able to use this unit with them. I'm being serious. I think the only instances in which you wouldn't really want to use Lynae with them is if you're playing a negative status DPS, which I'll talk about more later. But otherwise, basically every DPS in the game is somewhat capable of using this character. So, if you want just a good universal support in general, then she's going to be an amazing pickup for you. I was honestly quite surprised when Kuro Games decided not to open up 3.0, their big new premier region, with a main DPS character, but I would say that this is basically the next best thing. A support, a second slot teammate, that is able to work with almost virtually any character in the game. Now, obviously, she's going to end up being better for some units over others, and we're gonna have to wait for her official release, so that we're gonna be able to test that out and see who she's going to be absolutely best with. However, I would say that rest assured, no matter who you main, you're going to be able to use this character with her. So even if this is not a main DPS, they still managed to make a character that is going to be able to benefit basically everyone except negative status users. Now, I will say that if you're not struggling with vigor management in TOA, and you're not really having any problems putting together full teams, then sure, the value of that is diminished, but what if I told you she was best in slot for numerous units? Now, not every character in the game is going to use Lynae as a best in slot. However, there is a group of characters that is very much going to want to use her. Now, once again, we are somewhat limited in terms of official information because Kuro didn't reveal every detail of her kit, so we're going to have to wait for her official release in order to completely test her out and see who she's going to be best with. But what I will say is that if she's already going to be amazing for so many different characters in the game, I would say it will just depend on what her outro skill ends up being, and whenever we officially find out what that is, I would assume that she's going to be best in slot for that group of characters, and if not best in slot, then at least very good. So for basically every non-negative status main, I can really recommend this character. Another thing is that she's going to be an excellent investment into the brand new meta, that being Tomb Break. I wouldn't really worry about this being anywhere near as bad as negative statuses were, simply because this is something that every character is able to do, and we haven't really seen a main DPS for Tomb Break release yet, so we are yet to see how they're fully going to handle it from here on out. However, if it's something that you're interested in investing in, then Lynae's going to be a good pull right now, because while I usually encourage just waiting for the unit's rerun, because after all, there's not really much pull pressure to get a character on launch considering that Kuro usually reruns them at appropriate times, I would say that in this unit's case, because she's so good for a vast majority of the cast, not only is she going to offer you oodles upon oodles of value upon her own initial release, but she's only going to get better whenever we get another Tomb Break character that is likely going to utilize the mechanics more. And I should specify, this is not a Cantarella situation in which, yeah, she can work in a couple of teams here and there, but it's not really going to be the best, because in Cantarella's case, she could pretty much fit into any team that demanded skill damage percent. However, she wasn't really optimal there, and she wasn't really an optimal character in general until we eventually got the release of Ferlova. However, I believe in this particular character's case, she is definitely going to be much better off, and I do think that she's just generally going to be a good pull on the whole for basically any type of player. She's going to be really good for new players, because if you're just starting off, you don't really have to worry about getting super specific supports for super specific teams. You're easily able to get into the game and pick up this character that's basically going to be able to cover your second slot teammate needs for most of the cast. And if you're a more experienced player, well, like I said, we're gonna have to wait for her official release to do some proper testing. However, I believe that she is likely to end up being best in slot for a good chunk of characters, even before the whole Tomb Break meta really sets itself into place. So because of that, yes, while Tomb Break doesn't really have any need to be invested into right now, it's still not really a bad idea to just get her in general, and then down the line, whenever they do eventually make a Tomb Break dedicated character, you're already gonna have your Lynae on hand. And that's the thing, she's going to improve very soon. And I'm not really just talking about them eventually adding a DPS that utilizes Tomb Break more. We're gonna have to test out Tomb Break whenever it comes out, every character is going to have access to it, and I'm very curious how it's going to influence rotations. But that's not actually what I'm getting at. No, what I'm getting at is more so that Morn is going to be coming out on the second half of this patch, and I believe that it is likely that those two are going to pair together to make quite a strong core. Morn will of course get her own video closer to her own release date, however, she appears to be quite a nice universal healer, with toon break mechanics. So, considering that, and considering Lynae, not only are they going to be good toon break investments, but paired together, I wouldn't be surprised if Lynae gets an upscale. Now, obviously, that's not really anything that we know for certain yet, and we're gonna have to wait. But I do believe that even if she's going to be really strong on launch, that's not even going to be the full package, and it is very likely that we're going to get an upscale not too long down the line. And another good thing about this character, yes, she has a ton of pros going for her, she is a really good character, is that because she's a pistols user, she's going to be able to use Static Mist. That is a very nice supportive standard weapon that's able to buff the attack of the incoming Resonator. Now, I should add, we do have new standard weapons coming to the game yet. However, at least as of the making of this video, we don't know what the passives of those weapons are yet. So maybe Static Mist ends up being outclassed, but for now, I'm gonna at least say this. She's gonna be able to use standard 5-star pistols, one of them being Static Mist, which historically has been a very good supportive weapon. This makes her signature weapon very skippable, and I would say that's honestly quite important, because then you can save those Astrites to invest into a main DPS's signature weapon instead, and all around, this makes her one of the most Astrite efficient pulls in the game. She seriously is worth your Astrites. However, I have indeed sung the praises of this character enough, because now we have to move on to her cons. Now, I'm going to be honest, her cons are not really a deal breaker, and I can only fully recommend that you pull for this unit. But yes, she is still skippable, and yes, you can just use the existing teammates that are already available for the archetypes that we currently have. You can indeed do that, but I will not downplay this character's potential meta value. However, she's not going to be helping negative status mains, unfortunately. Now, at least in 3.0, this isn't going to be a problem if you're a Cardathea main, because Shakona is going to be getting a rerun alongside Cardathea's banner. However, if you're a Zani main and you don't have Phoebe, you already know how it is, and no, this character is not going to be able to help remedy that, unfortunately, nor is Cardathea going to be able to go without Shakona if you choose Lynae instead. This is an unfortunate situation in which those teams were made to be so rigid, and they really want such specific characters with such a specific team structure that you basically can't fit Lynae anywhere into those teams. So even if she does end up being a really strong second slot teammate, she's not really able to do anything much for those two characters in particular. So unfortunately, if you're a negative status main, you're basically not going to be benefiting from this. Cardathea mains did recently benefit from Chisa, though that was only a small upscale, and Zani mains basically didn't gain anything from Chisa's release. Now, like I said, I wouldn't really consider this to be a deal breaker unless Cardathea and Zani are genuinely the only two DPSs on your account, and I'm gonna be honest, considering how TOA ideally wants you to have 4 built main DPS characters, and how there's resistances in WuWa that encourage using different type of character attributes, I highly doubt that you're only ever going to be sticking to 2 main DPSs. It's very likely that you're going to have at least 3 at minimum, because sure, maybe you can just use somebody that's half built or not really that well built for one of the side towers in TOA because the side towers aren't that hard, but all around, it's unlikely that you're only going to have 2 main DPSs, both of which are negative status characters. But it still ends up being a shame for negative status mains because they're not really able to benefit from a powerful new character's release like this. Though I would say, this isn't so much Lynae's flaw, as much as it is just a flaw with how negative statuses were designed. I'm not going to be pinning this on Lynae. And another thing is that in an ideal world, it is likely that you're going to want Morn. Now, I don't really think this is a big deal, because I personally have quite high faith in Lynae's meta value on release. Like I said, we're gonna have to wait until we can do some proper testing, and until we can get the full details on her kit whenever she officially releases into the game. However, I do believe that she is ideally going to want Morn, considering that they both deal in tomb break mechanics, and I do think that both of these 3.0 characters are going to be the keys to the puzzle in order for the next tomb break DPS, aka somebody that's going to be made with this mechanic in mind, to have a big, strong, best-in-slot team. Though, like I said, this shouldn't really be considered a deal breaker because I don't really think her meta value is going to hinge on this. I think it's more so just a small little thing that you can consider, and if anything, I don't really think that it's going to damage you that much in the long run. I do still believe that the character is independently going to be very useful. So it's still a flaw and I would still like to point it out, but I don't really think that she's going to be reliant on her ideal scenario. Definitely a cool and creative character to introduce us to Lahai Roi. I'm really excited for what's coming ahead. I think the music video was absolutely amazing. I thought the livestream itself was really decent, and all around the content that they showed off, I'm excited to give it a go. I think it looks really good. So all around, I really am excited for Lahai Roi, and I think this character looks absolutely fantastic, and it appears as if she's going to be a very valuable pull. So all around, a pretty exciting character release for most people involved. Hopefully this video was able to tell you Lynae's biggest pros and cons. This has been Juice, signing out, and Kuro Games, I am extremely excited for Lahai Roi, but can you please make sure the optimization is good?